Recording is on.
Welcome to DXD Token Working Group call number 3. We're going to go over some token model for DXD here. So I'm going to share my screen to the presentation here. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, so just kind of go over the agenda for today, what we're going to talk about, just do a quick recap of the last two calls, and then, first, before we get into the new DXD token model, how we talk about those things, I think we talked about the last couple of weeks, I think we have some discussions on like the current DXD liquidity and kind of some issues on that and maybe how we can address some of those. So I want to talk about that and then get into this kind of talking about like a new policy framework for DXD token accrual. And then at the end, dive into a little bit of a treasury management discussion. So we actually have the guys from Kaparki here who have been doing they've been doing some good work for a bunch of different DAOs here. And so we want to maybe chat a little bit further about what could happen with DXDAO there. So just to recap, so as I said, this is the third call. The first call went over the history of DXDAO and DXD, like how we got here. Call number 2 discussed some comparable projects, token models, looking at Ohm, looking at Temple, and looking at a couple different ones for maybe ideas that DXDAO could learn from. And then, as I said before, we're also using this as maybe an opportunity to discuss maybe some current DXD issues with the liquidity there. So just to start, this is going to be talking first about just kind of getting closer to NAV, more of like a short and medium term thing at first. So yeah, DXD and NAV, no surprise to anyone here. DXD continues to trade far below NAV despite 30% reduction in supply. This is a bad look. And so I think you can see here a couple different projects that we've compared to. Both of these have actually just recently their NAV ratio has actually shot up in the last couple of weeks. For Temple, it shot up because they did this Temple Ascend, which basically purchased a lot of different Temple below NAV through a liquidity bootstrapping pool. And then Ohm, it's more because I think their liquid treasury value dipped below their the token value. So it wasn't that the token value went up; it's more like the treasury value went down. And then we can see kind of DXD there at 44% right now. And so this is, again, a problem that I think we're all aware of. The current current DXD liquidity, and I think in the last month, we've really had a lot of issues with GPv1, so Gnosis Protocol v1. It's always taken a lot of headache to do that. And so we are switching over to Cal Protocol, I think as of like today, actually. So we talked about this on the governance discussion yesterday, and we've already done some test trades for WEF and XDAI. And so here for the existing DXD buyback, we're going to switch over to Cal Protocol, going forward. That will be a little bit different because it doesn't rely on an oracle. It just executes at market price. So given the low liquidity, the orders will be small and there will probably be some slippage, but I think it's important to just keep doing that. And so that is still on the old buyback extension, number 9, that was there. And there's about, I think, 60 ETH that is still to be there. And then there's already been 500K that has been authorized for additional purchases. And I think it's an opportunity for us now to kind of think about like, okay, well, what is the best way to kind of use those buybacks in kind of the most efficient way, but also just kind of the way that will be, I think getting DXD closer to NAV. So I'm thinking kind of like a two pronged approach here is, we have Cal Protocol obviously exists both on mainnet and Gnosis chain. Mainnet, there's a little bit more liquidity for DXD. Actually, I think a significant more liquidity for DXD on mainnet, as well as I think just putting orders on mainnet it's a much easier way to attract that. But you can still get Gnosis chain for price discovery and other ways. And the other key thing with Gnosis chain that is better is we can submit orders through proposals that only take 5 days, whereas with mainnet, those take 16 days to do. And that's because the Cal protocol like the smart contract for the Cal protocol is not whitelisted into DXDAO governance. So on mainnet, it takes we have to use this other scheme to pass the proposal that takes a little bit longer. And yeah, and so let me change screen here. Where's the stop sharing? There, no, not that. Okay, this one. Yeah, and so I just kind of wanted to lay out potentially what this could look like. And Connor and I had actually talked a little bit about this, like kind of two-pronged approach here. And so I think having basically like being able to use Cal protocol to do limit orders for DXD on mainnet, and then to just be able to have like a nice, like basically order book that has there that would provide some support for like when the price will spike from different buybacks, like having some kind of support there. And so this is something, just kind of an idea of what we could do in terms of placing limit orders here. And so we could submit these kind of starting in the next couple days here, but just kind of gradually submit limit orders on the way up over this time to like 0.5. And you can see here, the execution day, as I said, it's 16 days after. So it wouldn't actually, the order wouldn't be placed until then. And so it does make it a little bit difficult to figure out what price to do. So I think it's better to not really think you're going to time the market, more of just like the order book will have liquidity at, every tick. And you think about like, there is, I guess the only downside of these limit orders is there's some opportunity cost for the ETH, but given that there's so much ETH in DXDAO's treasury that's not really doing anything, I don't think it is that bad that there's a limit order at 0.24 ETH at 0.24 DXD ETH, even though, for instance, like DXD price might not be there for a while. It does, I think, provide like a good level of support. And then like on Gnosis Chain, what we could do is over the next, I think it's like 2 weeks, basically, have 5 ETH orders or 5 WETH orders that are executed. And remember, this is only 5 days, so this would be the upcoming more. And then after that, this would be all of the ETH that's left over from buyback extension number 9. And then we would shift to the new 500K authorization. And then I'm proposing, we talked about this a little bit, is to actually use stable coins to purchase them there. Just when you think about like DXDAO is purchasing DXD with ETH, and basically if you purchase it with stable coins, it's kind of like in a roundabout way, basically buying some ETH or just not selling ETH instead of the stable coins. It's still, of course, all the limit orders would be in ETH, and I still think some of that is there, but I think it's an opportunity maybe to do that for on Gnosis Chain. And so then this would just be like orders that could be place daily market buys on Gnosis Chain through CalSwap there. And then this, with these orders total, this would be over like the next, kind of month and a half here. That would be about 420,000 planned purchase, and that would still be under the 500K that we had talked about there. So I don't know if anyone has kind of any thoughts on this in terms of like an initial plan. As I said, this is like the short-term idea and kind of getting things back and dealing with DXD liquidity. And we can talk about the long-term token model in a second, but any thoughts on this and using Cal protocol again, which has it has a market buy we can use on Gnosis Chain, and then we can use the limit order, but they're not necessarily thrilled about us using limit orders, but I think they're okay with us doing it. And so I think this is a plan that should provide at least like a good initial liquidity batch over the next month and a half.
I think it's a good approach. I think the only thing that I would say, and I think you probably are in agreement with this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but like the price of the limit orders, I think like you said, that's just an idea of how it could look. Like if someone dumps a load of DXD, then like adjust them down, I guess, like so that we're not like putting a limit order in at 0.3 and then someone who would ordinarily be selling at like 0.25 like could take 0.3. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, the only like issue with this, or like the thing to, I guess, skate around, is that there is such a long lag between the submission day and the execution day. So like let's say we like, oh, we shouldn't be submitting at this price, but like that's when you're submitting the proposal, and then you're not sure what it's going to be like 16 days later.
Yeah. It's true, but I think it's probably, and I'm someone that obviously wants like us to get to NAV like as soon as possible, this stuff. But I think it's probably better to be on the side of caution with that and like submit too low rather than too high. Like, and even if it just sits there for a while and like it just acts as backstop liquidity, if nothing else. Like,
Yeah, and I think like that's why we would start with like 0.24, and I think what it's trading like 0.28 right now. And we could even start lower because, like, to your point, you want to like provide that like support and then just kind of gradually go up there. Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? I guess Dave saying we can decide an order expiry date. Yeah, and I guess like when that happens, we'd want that just because if we had like a really low order that was placed on there, like eventually we'd have to want to get that ETH back. Okay, Foxu.
Chris, I might have missed it. What was the on the bottom right, the where you switch to DAI, 4,000 DAI? What's that?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually you might have been the first one that brought this up. This would just be doing some of the buybacks with stablecoins instead of ETH.
Yeah.
I mean, because it is like a roundabout way of buying ETH, and like I don't know if you guys like me, like I like buying ETH at 1,300.
Quick question, and I mean, I may have kind of like missed something here, right? But like historically, right, we haven't really like seen any evidence that like the buyback program actually like increases the price. So what is the reason, or like I mean, what are we kind of like expecting this time to be different?
Yeah, I think I think everyone here is in agreement that the buyback program is not a very effective way of driving value to DXD long term. That's kind of like one of the reasons I think we're like starting like doing the DXD token working group and then maybe trying to come up with like a different model. I think right now the only mechanism that DXDAO has to drive value through DXD is through this buyback process, and it's like manual. It's not really like it's not really that great, but that is really like the only thing we have right now. And so this would be like a very like more of a plan for like the next month and a half, and then trying to figure out if we can have a different model that gets us more of like a long-term sustainable.
and the other thing to mention is that the more that we buy back so far under the NAV, like the cheaper it's going to be, whatever the token model is going forward, like the easier and cheaper it's going to be for us to sustain that one afterwards. So if like in the meantime, if we can reduce that circulating float, then like it's just going to make things cheaper, whatever we decide to do after that.
Well, I mean, only if we. I mean, I'm personally, I'm not convinced, that any kind of like buyback here is gonna have actually like a lasting impact. I don't know. Like, I think there's kind of like a lot, kind of like more important things where we probably need to work on. It's all kind of like related to like the rep model. I think that's kind of like the root of all evil. But it seems like we are set more on, like looking for ways to reduce the supply of DXD, I guess.
Chris, can you elaborate on the rep?
Well, I mean, it's. I mean, like, I don't want to kind of like start like the whole conversation, right? That's gonna like distract us kind of like quite a bit here. So unless we kind of like really want to go into that area, I would prefer if we maybe just reserve it for like another day and focus on the DXD token for this call.
And I do think you're right that like the goal is more reducing DXD supply rather than like that long-term sustainable thing. And I think as Connor was saying, like that is like you're just kind of you're giving more value to DXDAO itself for eventually or DXD holders eventually when we do get to a better model.
And Chris, I'm not sure if you've seen the latest forum posts on the restructuring refocus, but I don't know if you know, I'm also like pure DXD holder. I don't hold any rep, but I think the questions around the rep model and the interaction between DXD and rep are sort of the conversations have been starting around that in the forum. I've just posted in the chat the link to that, which might be helpful if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, cool. Thanks. I will need to have a recap.
Cool. Let me. So yeah, I think we'll kind of I think put more like a plan for how to do this, execute these ones over the next like month and a half. But I think using both mainnet and Gnosis chain, and then also introducing the some buying in stablecoins would be good. And we're going to have to coordinate a little bit with the Cow protocol people because it is a little tricky to do this. But they are very interested in, I think, working with us because it is kind of cool that a DAO is doing this and a DAO is using Cow protocol. So they've been interested in working with that. And Dave is the one who's kind of coordinating the actual like order placements, because the way it works is you actually have like anyone can place the order on behalf of DXDAO, but then it has to actually be signed by DXDAO. So the proposal itself is actually just signing an order that's created by someone else. Okay, let me get back to this screen. Yeah, and I guess maybe we were just talking about there, but is that enough? Is that like a way to provide like a liquid market for DXD? Is that going to really help? Are there other things we could consider to get back to NAV at another level? So like if DXD does get to 0.5, should DXDAO just provide like $1 million of liquidity? Should we do like a liquidity bootstrapping pool? I don't think we need to answer these questions yet, but I think there are like things we should be thinking about as this next round of buybacks goes through. And then back to a new DXD token model, kind of what we're focusing on, like the long term. So assuming DXD gets to a point, a healthy place, we can kind of think about, well, what is a more efficient way of doing this? So we don't have to place all these orders, so we don't have to have all these parameter changes there. So I think the starting.
Maybe I'm sorry. Just maybe have you kind of like considered like different ways to like reduce the floating supply of DXD using those 500K? I'm just kind of like mentioning this because I mean obviously we can do like buyback, right? But it seems like the more we buy back, the more enters the market, and so maybe we could have something, I don't know, like stake your DXD for I don't know like a year, and you get a share of like the 500K, and potentially we increase that over time or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's actually very similar to I think what we would be doing for like a new token model. So I think like the problem is like that would take just time, and like how do we have like a more immediate intervention? Right, that's what we were kind of discussing before, and I think going like what we're going to discuss now is precisely those types of ideas there.
I think could you just kind of like use the original synthetic staking contract and fork it, put the 500K in, and award it to DXD holders over I don't know like a 1 year time horizon or 2 year time horizon?
Yeah, I mean you could, but like what's the yield on that going to be? Like how much DXD is going to be staked in that? I think you would probably need more than 500K to actually drive value to that. So yeah, I think that it's just figuring out more than just what to do with that 500K is important.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so I think we probably hit on some of those ideas and some that I have here. So just thinking about like again, like the starting point we're having for DXD is, I think this is kind of basic stuff, but DXD's value comes from future cash flow from its treasury. All value generated by DXDAO, revenue, product tokens, DX Ventures investment should flow to the treasury eventually. And the Treasury, in turn, then needs to provide a liquid market for DXD at a fair value through whatever mechanism, whether it's some staking mechanism or something else. So I kind of had this working through this, like what I'm calling like a DXD monetary policy framework, because I actually think one of the ways to go about this is to have a couple different tools that you're using to adjust this. And so these are the 4 different ones that I'm kind of looking at. Of these are like the pillars that would be able to achieve this, like, this ability to how can the Treasury in turn provide a liquid market for DXD at a fair value. And I think it's having these 4 components. So it's like a price floor support, absorbing sell pressure, the ability to mint new DXD, and then like ensuring a liquid market for DXD. So the price floor support. So this would be a commitment by DXDAO to purchase any amount of DXD at a certain percentage of NAV. Say 70%. This would actually be kind of similar to what we're using with Cal Protocol, where we could just do simple limit orders on mainnet, and this can be submitted, or we could use ETH or stablecoins to do this. This is manual submissions, but it could be in large amounts, as it's kind of just basically DXDAO will always commit to buy an infinite amount of DXD at that value, because eventually, like, that is a good value, because it would be at what it's 70% or whatever the number would be. And this is actually modeled off of the Temple Defend. That's what they basically had, is they had like a floor support that they would always provide for DXD. I mean, sorry, for Temple, for them to be selling there. And in this way, for the DXD acquired through this one, this DXD would actually be returned to the general treasury. And then the second one I'm calling absorbing sell pressure, and these are, I guess you call inverse DXD bonds. And Christopher, I think these are kind of can be very simple to like the synthetic staking contract, but they can also be a couple different things. And so this is also modeled off of Ohm. So very simply, you could have DXD be deposited into a smart contract, and then you can redeem from the treasury in the form of an inverse bond. So a very simple example, you could stake DXD for 90 days and then receive 100% of treasury NAV in ETH or stables. So it's essentially like a zero coupon bond or something there. But I think you could use these in a couple different ways, and you could adjust a bunch of different parameters to try to appeal to different DXD token holders. And so some of these words, because they are inverse bonds, I'm taking some of the language from bonds, but it sometimes doesn't carry over. But yeah, the 3 things I think you could change is you could change like the principal to be repaid. This could be greater or less than 100% NAV. If you wanted to encourage or discourage something, you could change the maturity date, right? It could be a very short-term something. It could be you could redeem in a week, or you could redeem in a year or 2 years. And then you could also change like the coupon, right? So you could have something where, like a real bond, you actually are getting periodic payments in ETH or in stables, rather than just the one lump sum at maturity. Obviously, like the way that the value would be calculated, it would in the end be whatever the NAV number would be, but you could actually have some of those payments be streamed to the DXD token holder in that manner. And then the DXD from these bonds would be burned, because I think this is kind of a way of when you're the idea of an inverse bond and redeeming from the treasury, kind of going back to the bonding curve, you would actually just be, I think, best to be burning the DXD. And then I think one of the things I like about the inverse DXD bonds is they create some optionality. So I think you could have like an effective monetary strategy that can consist of several different types of bonds. So like just, this would be something you could decide. You could say, okay, there's going to be $250K of inverse bonds that mature immediately and pay out 80% of NAV. You could have $250K of inverse bonds that mature in 3 months at 90% of NAV, and then $250K of inverse bonds that mature in 6 months at 100% of NAV. Or even like kind of, I think another way to think about this is you could actually have a year bond that basically pays out at higher than NAV, and then it's basically achieving that with like a monthly payment in there. And I think having these, this would require some management to determine like what bonds are issued, what are the parameters of them. But I think when you look at DXD token holders, they will vary a lot in their needs. And so you could imagine someone that's, well, I want liquidity on my DXD token to buy a house in like a year, but I don't really need it right now. So you could just stake that and be able to get the NAV, the full NAV payment, just because you'd be willing to wait around. So some advantages to this, you give the time for the treasury to adjust liquidity to redemptions. So I think one of the things that if you are having redemption from the treasury, one of the things that is difficult is you have to prevent a bank run, right? So if you're allowing redemption of the treasury in ETH, and you have some of your treasury not in ETH, then you have to be able to manage that to make sure that if someone comes to redeem DXD for ETH, you have enough ETH to do that. So if you have a bunch of inverse DXD bonds that are issued that people deposit into, that in a year there will be a lot of NAV that they will redeem at NAV, then like in that meantime, the treasury governance can adjust to that and plan for those redemptions. Inverse DXD bonds, obviously, they take DXD off the market. If you'd be depositing into a smart contract, it'd be an inverse bond that would not be able to be sold. So it'd be a really great way of taking DXD off the market. And then, kind of to Christopher's point, like I think it creates a structure for dividend-like payments as well as long-term staking. And so it's not so much that it is, it could be just a staking one, but you could adjust a bunch of different parameters to allow that. And I definitely think, I don't think buybacks are efficient in really any way and capital efficient there. And so I think moving to something that has dividend-like payments or long-term staking is a good model. But I like this inverse DXD bond because it gives you some flexibility, I think, in how you're adjusting that. So maybe we just stop there because I'm kind of curious to get people's thoughts on this idea of basically having like a floor price that DXD would be like willing. I mean, DXD would be willing to purchase an infinite supply of DXD at a certain price, and then these like DXD inverse bonds that would be a way of like absorbing the sell pressure. Now, when Connor, this is kind of, I think we talked a little bit about the bond stuff there. I don't know if this is it like too confusing?
No, I think it's good. I think the only thing that I would say is on the inverse bonds, like I don't think, even if it was over a year, I don't think that any of the bonds should be over 100%. I think 100% should be like hard cap, just for the sustainability of the DAO, I guess. But I think the price floor is good if the percentage is right, and where it's a good balance between fair for those who do want to exit, but also good for those who want to stay. So like obviously if someone's gonna sell a bunch at 70%, 75%, whatever it ends up being, then usually at the moment someone sells, the rest of everyone is sort of disappointed because the price is going down. Whereas in this scenario, like their proportionate ownership of the remainder of the DAO goes up. So like you sort of get a situation which I saw with Temple, where the more that is sold into that price floor, the happier everyone else that's left over is. So it's quite a nice dynamic where even selling can be a good thing for everyone who's left.
Christopher, is this any thoughts on this? Kind of fit a little bit where this could be the staking model you were thinking, but just a little bit more flexibility?
I mean, I do like the model. What I'm kind of like, I mean, like we are like just trying to patch the symptom, right? And we're not kind of like really like trying to fix the root cause of like all of the issues that we're having, right? And like I'm just kind of like thinking, right? We can come up with like something, super, I don't know, like amazing, yeah. But if we are like not really fixing the root, the core of like the problem, which is again rep, in my opinion, we are not really we're not kind of like
What would DXD holders, if DXD holders had all of the governance power, what model would they come up with?
Well, I mean, then first, we would probably need to work on, like better incentives to, create like products that work, and like more streamlined work streams, and kind of like a more kind of like approach to actually like working, and at that point, like incentives would be like much more aligned, and I think there would be examples, where I think we would actually increase the likelihood of having like successful products. Quite a lot.
Even in that scenario, you need some way for those successful products to translate into token value. So I think like what we're talking about here, like I mean the governance thing you're kind of talking about, like how do we have better product development? How do we incentivize the right things? And I think that is all super important. And I think as Connor said, I think we're going through to addressing some of these issues now, and I think it will take some time to do. But I think that is separate from when all of those issues are solved. At the end of the day, how is success being translated into DXD? Because right now there's no way for that. So I think they're kind of like they're two separate issues.
Yes,
both.
I 100% agree, right? But like working on like this DXD token model stuff now, without having kind of like fix the other thing. Number one, it takes up capacity, like development capacity, from fixing like the core issues, right? And then once these core issues are fixed, as you kind of like said, which kind of like might take some time, there might be kind of like very new DeFi constructs that we cannot even anticipate now, that might be a lot more efficient, than what we are like discussing now. And so I'm sorry, like it's not very like the most constructive feedback, but just kind of like for me, it's all about always, like having very clear focus on, working actually like on the root causes of like the problems. And even though like I agree with, like the proposals that you're making here, definitely sounds, sensible. It's more so, it's more so a painkiller, and it's not kind of like really trying to fix the underlying issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of this is being driven by, I guess, kind of some other DXD. Oh, sorry, the camera's moving. It's falling in my hand. Is being driven by DXD holders who are unhappy with the price of DXD and the lack of liquidity. And so I think that's what we're trying to address. And I agree with all of the kind of the things that we can kind of focus on, but just from the priorities that we've kind of heard from other DXD holders, it seems that like this is an important thing to be able to provide some liquidity and some like token model there. Again, just like kind of going back to the problem here is that like DXD is just trading really, really far below book value.
Yeah, but I mean, like the same is true for like a lot of other. I mean, you could have also put like Nexus Mutual in there, for example, and like it would have had like a similar like NAV ratio, right? And so you would probably like pick more like the projects, that that are trading like closer to like their NAV, right? And I mean, like for me, like we are like a pretty large DXD holder, right? And our biggest problem is definitely not the price. Our biggest problem is really, the incentive model is just fundamentally broken, and there is, like very little incentive to actually like fix it.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, and it's good to hear different kind of opinions of DXD holders, because again, like one of the reasons we've been doing this is because large DXD holders have been pushing for it, because it's important, I think, to get liquidity. And there is like a little bit of not like a death spiral, but I think this is also happening with Nexus Mutual, where like people are just turned off to the project because it's trading off below its some NAV. And so I think like that's kind of, we can address it then. And then I'm just thinking about like kind of the incentive issues. Yeah, I mean, I really think, and is the post that Connor shared, that's like the phase one of this, and I think the phase two that is happening over the next 6 weeks is really going to address this. And so I think there is like long term, the only way that DXDAO works, the only way that DXD accrues value is if there is like a functioning system of different people being incentivized to do the right things. But I think one of the things that's maybe different from some of those other projects that have raised money that are all about like kind of doing product development is like DXDAO has a very big treasury that I think figuring out how that treasury value translates into DXD is important, or I guess that's where we kind of arrived at the conversation there, which is I think kind of separate from how does DXDAO make great products.
Yeah, but I mean, also then here, right? I mean, like an increased DXD price or like increased DXD liquidity right now only benefits sellers. You know, for like the current market is kind of like a dream come true for buyers, right? The thing is just, you know, buyers are not interested because of like wrap, basically. But it also kind of like seems like really like most of, I mean, I would personally like, you know, question like the motivation of, you know, like people that really want this. It seems to me like they might be looking for like a way out.
I mean, I'm someone who wants this, and I think like what you said there is this is a dream come true for buyers. So why is it not a dream come true for the DAOs to be a buyer and buy it back so that all the value accrues from it is then distributed across the remaining DXD holders. You know, I don't understand. I don't understand the issue of if you know, like you said, we tackle all the issues that you want to tackle later. Well, okay, but if the DAO is buying back below this far below NAV, then the fruits of the labor from the issues that you want to address later on are distributed between much less DXD, so you get even more of a benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, like it's hard to argue with that, right? But again, then I wouldn't, you know, like build something separate to that. I would just kind of like, you know, do, I don't know, like very manual buyback execution and not do kind of like further engineering work, because that should probably be spent on fixing like wrap related issues.
Yeah. So just on that, this is not an engineering, like I don't think that this would be like people should be putting engineering focus on this now. I see this much more as an important like signal to DXD holders, like kind of, you know, the Fed signaling what the future is, because there's just a lot of uncertainty right now on how DXD accrues value, because like we had this bonding curve that isn't really working, and then we have like the buyback here. So I think just making sure that there is a model that will be built towards is important. But I like, yeah, in terms of, that's why I think there's like the medium term is kind of getting there, and then it's sending this signal going forward. But yeah, I don't know in terms of like implementing this would be lower on the priority. And I think like the governance 2.0 things, like just for on that, I think we will have in the next couple of months, like that will be audited, and things are kind of working on that in Bogota there. So that of course has like a much higher priority.
Okay.
And maybe the only other thing that I've heard that it is difficult to get new investors into DXD, I guess, is maybe like that's probably like the more of the concern for me, is that there isn't really a liquid market for DXD, and even if it is a buyer's paradise, that sometimes you see people don't. I mean, again, you can look at candyfork.eth. I've been buying DXD with all of my payments for the last like 2 years. I think it is a great buy, but there does seem to be something that is like turned off people a little bit. And maybe that is what you're saying, that it's just like kind of the underlying issues of rep. And just to stick up for rep a little bit, I think if you look at the management of the treasury, I think rep holders have managed the treasury well, both in terms of the diversification it did, and also the value it's driven back through the buyback, that it didn't just execute like a big buyback that got it up to NAV and provided exit liquidity. It's acquired 30% of the circulating supplies, decreased 30% of that, and also like managed a treasury that is worth the same amount in ETH than it was when it raised. So you had 25,000 ETH that was raised, and right now, if you look at the value of the DXDAO treasury, not counting DXD, it's 25,000 ETH. And so I think maybe there's some things we can get into in building products and kind of incentivizing in different ways, but I think there are some strengths to the rep model.
and just my experience of trying to get others into DXD, like again, I've sort of only increased my DXD position and over time quite drastically. It doesn't even get to the point of rep. People don't even understand rep. They don't see that. They don't even look into it. It's a case of this is trading so far below treasury that there must be something wrong. I'm good. I'm not going to risk it. Like that's the feedback that I get when I talk about DXD to my network.
So I just want to, I think it's great conversation, but I want to just kind of make sure we're moving along just to discuss some other things, especially because I want to get into maybe some of the treasury ideas there. And so, yeah, I think the third and fourth one of this kind of monetary policy framework are not as, I think are not as complicated, or maybe they're a little bit easier, to understand. So if we could do new DXD minting, is there a world where we want to allow new DXD to be minted at whenever 100% of NAV in ETH or approved stablecoins is deposited, right? And so this would enable DXD capital base to grow. It also would basically prevent DXD trading above NAV, because if it was trading above NAV, obviously people would just go and mint new DXD with ETH or stablecoins, but that would again grow the capital base of the treasury. You could also set new DXD minting at like 110% of NAV or something. And so that would be like the new DXD minting, and then just creating like a liquid market for DXD. This would maybe be if we had, protocol and liquidity is used by a lot of other DAOs, and DXDAO has so far not been providing liquidity on that. And so it could be that in addition to having a price floor, in addition to having some of these inverse bonds, that DXDAO also like LPs on Swapper in addition to that. And that just, I think, would be like the final piece to make sure there's a liquid market for a fair price for DXD. So that's kind of like the four areas I was thinking about. And this is said as like the third meeting, and we're going to discuss some of this in Bogota with some of the other contributors and kind of get some other ideas. Maybe we can flesh this out a little bit more. But yeah, I'm thinking that something like this could be a model that we can kind of signal that this is going to be the long-term value of DXD as a way to make it attractive and to be able to educate people on what the appeal of holding DXD is. And so, hopefully, I don't know, the monetary policy framework, I think I need to come up with a different name for that. I don't know if I like monetary policy there. But yeah, any any kind of thoughts on this before we move on to some quick treasury discussion?
Chris, I think this is similar to the last call, but like if I'm high level trying to think about this, all those things you just laid out are to allow people to come freely in and out of this ecosystem. You believe it, you can go buy the token, and if you don't believe in it, you can exit at the fair market value, and revenue that gets made will go into this thing, and all the revenue, all the tokens that are in the current treasury are also in this thing. That's basically what like a truly working liquid bonding curve is. Like if we just put the entire treasury into the bonding curve, which you already have a bonding curve, the problem was the sell price was so low. But if we actually just put the entire treasury into the bonding curve, you give everyone the option to come in and out of this thing whenever they want. It's like allowing rage quit, which is like, I'm not happy with what this thing is doing. I will sell my DXD on the bonding curve, and I will take out my share of what's in the treasury and what's in the system. And like that's the whole point of that was the whole point of the bonding curve. The problem was the sell price was too low. But if we like made a real bonding curve that was actually liquid and worked, then it seems like it would solve almost all of these problems.
Yeah, and so I actually think this model is trying to mimic that in a lot of ways, but the key problem with the bonding curve in that way is the ETH in the bonding curve or whatever assets are in the bonding curve cannot be put to work at all. So you just like you basically lose your treasury and it's only backing like ETH there. Whereas like what you're trying to do here is basically like allow all of those things that the bonding curve has, but also have a treasury that you can use to deploy and earn a yield off of, fund product development, like a whole bunch of things. And you need to have a way of managing that treasury and then also like meeting those redemptions or meeting like anyone's depositing to give them that fair market price. And so I don't see how you can do that also with the bonding curve.
What if the treasury, like the actual operating current treasury, was the bonding curve? So obviously, still proposals could do things to that set of assets, but like at any time, people could still remove their share or something.
But you still can't like stake ETH. You can't like put DAI into curve pools, stuff like that, with that kind of thing.
Well, what if the staked ETH was in the bonding curve though? Like instead of just ETH in the bonding curve, it was staked ETH in the bonding curve. So you actually, when you withdraw, you get like multiple tokens.
Yeah, that could work for the ETH, but maybe not for like stables that you want to deposit into curves, stuff like that. I feel like this gives more flexibility for what you want to do with the treasury, and like you said, it ends up at like a very similar end result. So I think yeah, like, but it's just more flexible this way, I guess.
And like Scott, I actually think we could do that. That would be great. That just like takes a lot of manage. Like that would be kind of complicated when you like add other assets to it outside of ETH.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very simple and like elegant, and I think it's just like you can't use that ETH for anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's what the whole point of the original bonding curve was. But when they were, when you're making that was just ETH or your token, and so I don't know if there's other projects that have used that or similar. I think there probably are a couple, but I don't. Yeah, if they just have one asset versus their token, then it makes it harder, I guess. So.
Just something that I wanted to mention on the minting side of things, where you said about being able to mint DXD for 100%. I think you sort of look into whether 110% might be better, but also I think the number of DXD maybe should be limited to whatever has been done on the other side. So like if you've bought 10,000 DXD under NAV, then maybe limit it to 10,000 over, just because at some point the products that we build are going to be significant value as a proportion of like the treasury, and then you're sort of allowing buyers to buy in just for the treasury value, when like in the future the products should and hopefully will be like a significant portion of that. So why sell to people sort of under what the whole organization is worth? So maybe it's like limited to only what has been bought, so that it's like pure profit on the spread of what the DAO buys and then what it sells. Maybe that might be like a nice limit to have there. I don't know what other people think about that. The idea of like once the products are high value, then we might be selling ourselves short.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a question on what is NAV? Should account for all liquid assets, some plus some value of the non-liquid ones. So like how do you convey that? And then I think the other thing is thinking about what is done with the DXD that's acquired here. Here I said that just goes in the general treasury, and so maybe that could be that supply that you're talking about here, and then the bonds here it actually was going to be burning those DXD. So I think figuring out maybe a relationship between the new DXD minted and then the absorbing one, like how do those maybe they should be balanced. Cool. Well, I want to just Yeah, we'll continue this conversation, but just because we got just a little bit more time here, I want to talk a little bit about treasury yield and maybe let the Kaparki guys introduce themselves. But just like as a quick overview of, let me share the screen. Yeah, so just giving like kind of an overview of where DXDAO's current treasury. So you can see, I think right now it's 31 million total value, and this is the kind of breakdown in terms of the different assets and the places where DXDAO is the treasury is being put to work now. The first is there's about 700,000 in mainnet swapper in the ETH DAI pool, and then if you look on Gnosis chain, there are 4 different pools that DXDAO is LPing on. The largest being the WETH DAI pool there. But it's also doing some on the WETH WBTC, USDC, WXDAI, and the WETH DPI there. And then in addition to that, DXDAO has about 2,000 staked ETH here. I think, yeah, some is, this is Stakewise. Yeah, SE2 I think is Stakewise, and then this is Lido, and then this is Rocket Pool there. And so that's kind of where I think we're looking at in terms of now. And when you look at like the treasury yield, like what is being yielded on right now. Right now, you'd see that there are, about 23. This is all non-DXD, so this is just stablecoins in ETH, along with some of the other smaller tokens in there. And so right now, you can see 23.2 million is idle assets not being put to use. There's about 2.6 million in staked ETH that's earning like a very nice 4% yield. And then if you look at some of the other pools that have done well, even the ETH DAI and the ETH on Gnosis chain and mainnet have actually had a small return there, as has the USDC DAI pool that's actually on Swapper there. So this is, I don't think this is a very sophisticated deployment there, but there is some ability. The treasury has been deployed, and again, it's very cool because this has all been done trustlessly through different relayers there. And so, thinking about going forward is how to extract more yield, or what kind of is the way to do that. So if you see like our current utilization ratios, it's the amount of funds that are being put to work there. If that was 20% and we wanted that to go to like 40%, like where would that be? And so this would be, I don't know, maybe another 6.2 million, and that could come from a couple of different ways. It could come from, we could take the ETH we currently have, and then the staked ETH, USDC, DAI, LUSD. This is about like 30 to 40% of the USDC DAI and LUSD that's in the treasury. So have some of that there that we're using to extract more yield. And then where could it go? It could go to Curve in terms of stables. There's the Curve ETH staked ETH pools. We could also go to Swapper, both in ENS, ETH, and even like Swapper DXD ETH. And then I just think what's reported to be able to do this. I think reporting is important. We have some ability to do this now, but it does get like pretty complicated. And so I think we need some more capabilities there. We need a better DXD price if you're going to do liquidity provisioning on Swapper at DXD ETH. And then I think we actually need the ability to interact with Curve. So we have relayer contracts that allow us to provision liquidity on Swapper, but we would need something to do that with Curve. And then what else that could happen is we could have some type of leverage and risk management where we're doing a little bit more interesting things with the treasury in terms of extracting yield through some type of carry trade or something else. So these are just some initial ideas that maybe start the conversation for the treasury. And I don't know if Fasu or Marcel is here. Yeah,
it's just me.
Yeah, jump in and kind of chat a little bit about a Kaparki and what you guys have been doing.
Sure, I'll try to be brief. I hope my connection stays on because there's a thunderstorm here and it went down 3 times already. So let me take a step back, use some context for the work. If anyone doesn't know, a few months ago we presented this proposal for DXDAO to take care of the treasury development, but it didn't go through because mainly it wasn't decentralized enough, and DXDAO is probably the most decentralized DAO in the ecosystem right now, and our technology required that there was at least one trusted signer, which would mean centralization. Um, so what we have right now is the Zodiac module, which is working much better. It's working as expected. It hasn't shown any bugs in the last couple of months, and we're using it in the Gnosis chain. So what we wanted to propose, and before doing so, I wanted to talk to you about this in this call, was to start like to make another proposal and ask for a small sum, for example, of $10 million equivalent, and we could use it within the Gnosis chain for some time to see if you feel comfortable with the way in which we work, if it's something that makes sense for you, and once you do, if you do, we can have another discussion and probably talk about using this technology also on mainnet. So what we will do is make sure that there's enough liquidity whenever you need it for any expenses, any OPEX, or whatever you need, whatever obligations you need to face. And then with the idle funds, make them provide you with some yield so that um, eventually you can just forget about the treasury a little bit to focus on the core business of DXL. So that's what I wanted to share today.
Yeah, and I think a lot of what DXD could do is, there's a lot that we could do without needing that much more engineering development, or even kind of some of the smart contract stuff. And so I think some of the things here initially are really about just like the low hanging fruit here. But I think figuring out a way, this is the low hanging fruit, but this is, we're talking just going through the token model. Like the whole goal of this is like the treasury is really important. It needs to extract yield, and we need to get the utilization ratio up very high. So this is definitely a long-term thing we want to figure out how to scale. So whatever we do now in terms of building out more capability, like figuring out how that's like a good foundation for the future. And so I think like for the first thing that's important, like for me, is to just have Kaparki in some of these conversations, or other managers kind of as this, and suggesting some of these moves, and we can have discussions as a community to figure out like, okay, this is where we want to get in terms of doing and deploying the treasury in a little bit more creative way, and then that process will help build capability going forward.
Sure. Yeah, what we offer, well, we will first send the strategies to the DXL to vote, and if they are approved, we will be able to move forward with them. But yes, we will also participate in this decision-making process, in the process itself.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Kapari, I think the reporting you guys do for the Weekend Gnosis Farms is always a great read. It's really helpful to kind of see that, and I think just having that type of information and transparency on the treasury is an important thing that would, help us make better decisions, but also kind of communicate to a broader audience that there are things about DXDAO there. I don't know if anyone had any other thoughts on kind of the treasury. Connor, I don't know if you had anything in terms of like deploying the treasury and like risk management here.
Yeah, the thing that I wanted to ask first of all is so obviously we're still in the discussion stages about things that we've just spoken about with the different models of the DXD model, and having parts of the treasury ready for buy walls or bonds or whatever. Is that something that Kopacki would be able to sort of facilitate as well, like making sure that there's X amount of ETH or DAI or whatever it is ready, and sort of managing that redemptions or bonds or buy walls as well?
Yeah, that's what we have been doing for a couple of years now. Yeah, we would analyze your cash flow needs, so to speak, and we'll make sure that there's enough liquidity whenever you need it, and also that you have the ability to face emergent needs for funds. Maybe something comes up which was unexpected, and you need, I don't know, $5 million. and then we can get them within the hour for you. So making sure there's enough liquidity whenever you need it is like the first thing that we do.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that it's a different type of liquidity because I think with Gnosis stuff, you have the like your funding initiatives, kind of incentives here. But in addition to doing that for DXDAO and building products, we would have this like other element about token liquidity that is maybe a little bit more, but it's precisely that would require a lot like, oh, look, there's DXD that's an inverse bond that in 6 months we're going to need, some ETH, and being
Yeah.
able to like manage that and plan that I think is really important.
Yeah, that would be part of the analysis, and there would need to be dedicated people in our team for that because it has certain complexity, and we need to make sure that they are available on the spot. So yes.
Cool, sounds good. That was my main point.
Thanks.
Faku, can you describe how like high level how the Zodiac module allows the like transactions to happen more trustingly?
Yeah. So the Zodiac module would be hard coded with the strategy that we would post. What we would suggest is to do something overarching, like a generic strategy that details, for example, in which protocols and in which pools we could use, like what would be the allowed listed protocols and pools, for instance. And then the Zodiac module, when we transact with the safe, it will only allow us to carry out transactions if they are within the approved strategy. If we try to use a different pool, transfer funds, I don't know, whatever it wasn't specified in the strategy, it wouldn't allow it. So it's like a smart contract where the strategy which was coded is hard coded.
But within the allowed strategies, you can do the move like Karpaki can do all the movements on its own without having to seek additional like DAO signatures or anything.
Right, and it could be as granular as you wish. Like we could limit funds in pools. I mean, there could be any number of restrictions that you feel comfortable with.
Gotcha. Thanks.
And we were actually chatting just at the beginning of the call here. There was a call yesterday that Kaparki was on with the ENS DAO group there, and I'll just say it was fun hearing, or it was nice hearing ENS team Nick a lot, but talking about what they're interested in, their needs are, and it was a lot of the decentralization elements that we're talking about here that I think DXDAO has been pioneering. ENS is also interested in like some of those same things, and seeing this was basically like an open call. I think it was an RFP to manage the ENS DAO treasury, which I think is like $50 million and growing too from the fees there. And there was a good group of like 10 to 15 different managers. I think there was someone from Enzyme. There was a guy from Alistar, someone who's actually on this call a couple weeks ago. And then, yes, you can kind of see how this treasury management side of things is growing in the like DeFi trustless way, not just like, hey, give me your money and I'll give you 2 and 20 and like we'll call it. I'll come back to you in a year or something. Luca from Enzyme.
Yeah.
Avant Garde too was the other one. I can't remember what they're.
I'm still curious though if like custodianship of the assets can still be done by DXDAO. So DXDAO needs some way for its governance platform to do, let's say, a 2-day actual proposal that actually actions the thing. So it's proposed by Karpaki. It's then like a 2-day process to like get the DAO to actually cause the action from happening, but that Karpaki can't do something on its own that the DAO doesn't have to approve.
So Karpaki would wait for the votes to be over on the strategy, and then we could just go ahead and do all the execution without DXDAO's intervention, but within the boundaries decided by DXDAO. The operation would not have like a time delay where DXDAO can veto what we're doing, because that would allow for front running, for example, because the strategy would be there and people could just reproduce it, and then when the timer goes to zero and it executes without a veto, then the yields will be the same if other players in the industry have reproduced the strategy. Because everything's open, like open source and public. So the way in which it works is like, again, the strategy is approved, and then we can only do whatever was approved.
Yeah, and I think part of this is like we would be figuring this out together, right? And like how that's like executed, because like no one really knows. And I think Kaparki's strength is on the like reporting and the risk management side. And then it's like another question is like, well, what is like, I mean, Kaparki's not going to be, he's not the one building the smart contracts that is going to be like executing that. They're going to be using different ones. And there's a couple different options. Now, I think Zodiac is one, and another one is Mimic that is kind of there. But like those to me are all about like avenues to execute an overall like treasury strategy. And what you really need is like good reporting and risk management. And that is like independent of how you're actually executing or deploying.
Yeah, and also at any point, DXDAO could do whatever you want with the funds, because you have custody of your own funds and you can just, empty the safe, for example, or do whatever you need. That would not require Karpathy's intervention, because we would not have enough signatures to be able to do anything with the funds by ourselves.
Cool. Yeah, glad we got to have this kind of conversation at the end. I think as Connor was saying, like seeing how if we do implement like this new token model, like how that is maybe like requires a lot more liquidity management to be able to like meet the cash, or has a lot more cash flow needs that would need to be met by liquidity management.
Yeah, we would have several meetings about that until we make sure that we are perfectly aligned with your needs, because we need to make sure that you have liquidity when you need it. So because if not, you cannot face your obligations as a DAO.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Well, I think maybe we can call it there. I got to go sign this carrot campaign for Keenan here, or farming campaign, before it expires in the next 15 minutes. But yeah, this was great. I'll post some notes in the slides up on DAO Talk after this, and yeah, we'll continue the conversation on like the liquidity, the new token model, and then like the treasury stuff here. All are kind of different angles.
Sounds good. I'll see you in Bogota maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you everyone for your time.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.